Coming up on Network Africa, operatives of the Department of State Services and police invade the National Assembly complex in Nigeria. Cote d'Ivoire's President Al-Hassan Ouattara grants amnesty to former First Lady Simone Babo. And the police in Zimbabwe search for 9 senior officials of the opposition NDC alliance. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobawale. We begin in Nigeria, where the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has directed the termination of the appointment of the Director General of the Department of State Services, Lawal Daura, with immediate effect. A statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Office of the Vice President, Laolu Akonde, indicates that Mr. Daura has been directed to hand over to the most senior officer of the State Security Service until further notice. The sacking of the DSS boss follows the standoff at the National Assembly, where operatives of the Secret Service prevented federal lawmakers from gaining entry into the National Assembly. The sacking of Mr. Daura comes after a closed-door meeting between the Vice President and the DSS DG and the Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris. Meanwhile, the security operatives who earlier blocked the entrance of the National Assembly have now left the place. This follows a condemnation from Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, who criticized the unauthorized takeover by operatives. In a statement, the Vice President describes the action as a gross violation of constitutional order, rule of law, and all acceptable notions of law and order. According to him, quote, "The unlawful act, which was done without the knowledge of the presidency, is condemnable and completely unacceptable." The Vice President assures Nigerians that all persons within the law enforcement who took part in what he called a travesty will be identified and subjected to appropriate disciplinary action. Assembly leadership has called off its emergency meeting earlier planned for today, following the standoff between lawmakers and operatives of the Department of State Services. It was gathered that the DSS operatives arrived at the National Assembly earlier this morning and barricaded entrances leading to the complex, preventing lawmakers and staff from entering. Journalists were also barred from getting into the complex as a result of what the DSS allegedly said was an order from above.
It was drama many Nigerians at the National Assembly were not expecting.
We'll go in here by the grace of God.
As early as 7 in the morning, masked operatives of the Department of State Services blocked parts of the National Assembly, taking up strategic positions at various entry and exit points of the 2 chambers of the complex. Then the show began, with some of the angry lawmakers who were reportedly members of the People's Democratic Party daring the operatives to shoot.
I tell you to shoot this bullet, and Nigeria shall face you. I tell you to shoot this bullet. You cannot come and go back to your station. When I give them that order, we come here today to come and prove it to the Nigerians. 180 Nigerians. Yeah? Order from above. What above? Who's up above? Are they above the God that put them there? Is that what you actually call for? Do you call for this kind of a change? This impunity on the heads of that. You close Nigerian house. You are telling me Nigeria order from above. You are going to school till 9 o'clock. If you want to fight the government, go and fight the government. You want to fight democracy. It's not the government. They are not telling us. After the department, they couldn't tell us who the department actually came from.
Lawmakers then arrived at the NAS gate to condemn the action by the DSS.
We went into the building with some pushing and shoving. They allowed us into the building. The council chamber is shut, no air conditioning, no staff, so we can't do any work. So senators and House of Rep members are at the foyer waiting. We are waiting for the invasion that has not taken place. We are calling on Senator Akpabio to hurry up and invade. It's taking too much time. I don't know why it's taking too much time to overthrow the government. So Senator Akpabio, if you're listening, and the gang, we're waiting for you to invade so that we can photograph all of you and send it to the embassies. So the sooner you invade, the better for us. A lot of journalists here are tired, they're hungry, they want to go home, and you're taking too much time invading the National Assembly. You're breaking the law. We want evidence you're breaking the law, and the DSS operatives who are here also, please photograph all of them.
A terrible embarrassment. They should allow the National Assembly to do their job. The issue is they have so much talked about INEC budget. The Senate want to talk about the budget again, and this place is blocked. So is the INEC issue, the budget is the issue now? The answer is no.
What do you think is the issue?
Well, I don't know. We are here to do our job.
Attempts to interview the only APC lawmaker around at the time also led to dissenting voices. Finally, he was allowed to speak.
The law enforcement agency are to protect lives and property. Their being here probably have solved a lot of problems. If they were not here, look at the young men that the PDP organized.
The blockade comes just hours after news broke of an alleged call by the leadership of the National Assembly for an emergency meeting to discuss issues which included the string of defections, the 2019 elections, supplementary budgets, among others.
Let's get more on this story now from a legal practitioner, Mr. Eyitayo Obuyemi. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me here.
Mr. Eyitayo, what do you make of all of this?
Well, unfortunately, this happened. But, you know, for me, it's a violation of due process, particularly because these are arms of government, and they are supposed to be independent of each other. So if care is not taken, there are chances that it will create a situation whereby an arm of the government is feeling inferior to the other arm of the government. So that's what I think.
Mm. But under what circumstances, if any, does the law allow this?
Well, except in situation of maybe security fears, for instance. But in this case, the DSS would have to justify whether there was such threat in the first place.
Okay, and how best do you think the lawmakers who are affected by this should respond to it?
I have a very, very deep, I feel that they would want to wield their influence, I mean their power under the Constitution, to call for an investigation. But I also have some concerns. I mean, the primary concern is the fact that whether the National Assembly, even though it has the power to investigate, can act independently, particularly because it's the subject matter of discussion. So how independent, how professional is it going to act in this situation if it decides to go that route?
Mm-hmm. So there's been controversies over plans to remove the Senate President. Okay. On what legal grounds can this happen? What
the Constitution envisages, particularly because you know, this is about removal of leadership, not necessarily about removal of membership of the Assembly. Now, what the Constitution envisages is that for removal in that situation, it has to be done by 2/3 of the members of that Assembly, with or without any reason anyway, but at least there must be 2/3 vote. But in this situation now, and I think this is where we are getting to under the climate as it looks, in this situation now there was defection. And the law envisages that for defection to, I mean, for this kind of thing to happen, there must have been, maybe the unity must have been, there must have been a division in the party. So it leaves us with a question again, which looks constitutional. The question of whether or not there was real division that happened to necessitate this kind of situation. And I have my concerns because only the court of law will be able to tell eventually whether or not there was a real reason, I mean a real division that could have constitutionally led to defection and then still being a member of the National Assembly.
Okay, so with all that's been happening lately, what are your fears for the election in 2019?
Well, the same fear that an average Nigerian citizen would have. Are we going to be having independence of, are the candidates going to be able to conduct, do the election? Are they going to be able to do it independently? Are we going to have a peaceful one for that matter? And is this thing going to be hijacked by any person in authority? So these are common fears that I believe every average citizen of the country also shares, and I share the same fear as well.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
You're welcome.
Mr. Eyitayo Ogunyemi, a legal practitioner. In Cote d'Ivoire, imprisoned former First Lady Simone Gbagbo has been granted amnesty by President Alassane Ouattara. She's one out of 800 people that were pardoned by the president. Mr. Ouattara says most had been persecuted or sentenced for offense connected to the violence that killed thousands of people after the elections that brought him to power in 2010. Mr. Gbagbo was jailed for such offenses and has also been facing a new trial for crimes against humanity. Her husband, ex-President Laurent Gbagbo, is already being tried at the International Criminal Court. Police in Zimbabwe are searching for 9 senior officials of the opposition MDC alliance for allegedly inciting their supporters to stage an illegal demonstration last Wednesday. This search is the latest fallout from last Monday's disputed election, with the MDC alliance and campaign groups accusing the security forces of a crackdown to quell protests. 6 people were killed in clashes in the capital. Meanwhile, a group of MDC activists who were arrested and charged with inciting public violence have been released on bail by the courts.
The court has granted bail to all the accused persons. The court has indicated that it did not consider any of them to be a flight risk. The judgment was so brilliant, we're still trying to process it. It basically confirmed what we had submitted to the court, which is that the accused persons were definitely proper candidates for bail. The court touched on the merits of the case and highlighted the glaring weaknesses of the state case, which we also highlighted during our submissions. We have no doubt that these people are going to be vindicated. These people are going to be acquitted. In fact, it is a waste of the state's resources to even contemplate prosecuting these people.
Staying on with Zimbabwe, citizens in the country are hopeful for a change after last week's election. They say this first post-Mugabe election offered hope for democracy, but the disputed results delivered a familiar disappointment. 2 voters shared their hopes and frustrations with the outcome.
When 32-year-old Delation Dongo went to a polling station on July 30th, he felt privileged to be voting for the first time. According to Dongo, he had voted for the opposition's Nelson Chamisa, leader of the Movement for Democratic Change.
Yes, it's my first time to vote. I'm voting well. Vote for candidate I'm looking for, but unfortunately he loses election, and so he had disappointed me very well.
Voting day was hailed as peaceful, but 2 days later, MDC claimed results were inaccurate and the election was rigged in favor of Ngangwa. Supporters took to the streets in protest. In response, soldiers and tanks rolled into the capital and clamped down on citizens.
Yes, the ZEC says your vote is your right, but here, for me, it is not a right. Why? Because there are some areas I did not see the fairness from the ZEC.
Dongo, a father of 2 who's been driving his yellow taxi around Harare for the last 3 years, says he was not surprised by the outcome of the result that declared Ngangwa the winner, although he's disappointed. On the other hand, 29-year-old Alexio says he was pleased with the result and is eager to see what Ngangwa will do for Zimbabwe in the next 5 years. Alexio sells fruits and vegetables in Harare. He's among 1 million informal vendors in Zimbabwe forced into the sector by unemployment and a lack of options for survival in the country.
I voted for ZANU-PF because with what I do, It is the only party that can make me walk freely without any hindrance.
The 2018 Zimbabwe election is the first time elections to be held without Robert Mugabe on the ballot. It's also the country's first harmonized polls.
Still to come on the program, people in Kenya and Tanzania mark the 20th anniversary of the attacks on the U.S. embassy in both countries by Al-Qaeda. Please stay with us.